Right, hello folks. After messing up my first recording and turning off the audio for most of the video, I thought I'd try it again. Um, yeah, I haven't posted a video in a while because I've just been really, really busy with work. Today it's extremely hot and I've just finished work and I just want to kind of relax. But I just thought I'd do a quick video, for the little random ramblings bit and just outline some of the thoughts I'm having today. Um, I haven't been doing much research over the past 10 days, 2 weeks, because I've been super busy. I've got some war diaries coming in today, and over the next week or so, I want to write another blog for the Thetford research and get back into the GIS stuff for the East Yorkshire thing. So, yeah, I'm going to aim to kind of come back to that over the next week or two. But I just thought I wanted to do a little video while I'm still researching the next invasion threats video and all that. And with the hot weather today, it's just kind of reminded me of something that I saw in one of the war diaries that I received today. So my mate Mike, who's been at the archives on my behalf, I think it was yesterday, and he's picked up the 52nd Infantry Division, the Lowland Infantry Division's, what is it, Chief Royal Engineer War Diary. And one thing that's popped out in this is the mention of it's like a day-to-day weather report is included in there. So it says weather good, weather hot, and all this stuff in there. And that just got me thinking about how weather might have affected the construction of defences during the Second World War. So this is something that my mate Phil Hibbard brought to my attention and got me thinking about was that concrete sets at different rates in cold and hot weather. And if you get inclement weather and wet weather, this can substantially prolong how long it takes for concrete to set. And Phil's got a background in construction. His comments about this have really got me thinking. And kind of like the next part of this was looking into the potential for getting period weather forecasts for the period mid 1940 onwards, during the point at which the vast number of defences that were built during the Second World War were constructed, and seeing whether it's possible to tie in this defence construction with weather reports to see whether this had an adverse effect on construction, either slowing it down, for example, and then taking that one step further, looking at whether we can see any adverse weather effects within the fabric of surviving defences like pillboxes, for example, just to see whether that is reflected. And it's just something I've been thinking about, thanks to Phil and thanks to this war diary reminding me about this, and thanks to the hot weather today, which, being a redhead, I don't deal with very well and get very sweaty and annoyed. And yeah, I just start to melt in general. So yeah, that's something that's been on my mind today. Something I'm going to look at in the future as as something that we might be able to pick up in the field, and something as a kind of further point of research in terms of archaeological evidence for whether within surviving Second World War defences, given we know they were built within this period. And this is something I've kind of done before with Citizen, where we used wartime defences to assess the original coastal edge and use the locations of wartime defences to assess coastal change in the time after they were built. There's a blog on it. I'll stick a link in the description below. So yeah, that was kind of like one of the things I've been thinking of this week, other than today thinking about how I'm going to melt and how that I can't keep hydrated and how sweaty and horrible I am. I'll leave you with that image. One other thing that's sprung back to mind has been kind of like think about the Home Guard and how the Home Guard are kind of overrepresented, but the reasons for this. So generally, when I say about Dad's army, influencing people's perspective of the history, I'm more often than not I'm joking. It's Dad's army's not to blame for everything, and I'm fully aware of that. I just like to joke about it, but mainly because Dad's army has had such a massive impact on how people perceive these defences to a certain extent, and how it continues to act as a point of influence for most people's memory and has widely shaped public understanding, but not just public understanding, historical understanding of this period as well at both an academic and public level. And there's many other reasons for this, and this is something that I've talked about when I've been doing public talks and stuff. It's not just Dad's Army that has shaped public understanding. We also have the fact that the Home Guards were, by and large, a local military force, and as a result of being local and formed of local people, their stories stay where they were made, essentially. So I've also noticed as well. I did did a podcast for Alina and Chris, and the name of it, History Hack podcast, and that came out yesterday. And I noticed in that when listening to it that I say essentially a lot, and yeah, I do say essentially a lot, but it's mainly I use it as a kind of segue while I'm trying to think of what to bloody say, because otherwise I'd just go blank and not say anything. But that's a fun little drinking game there. If you want to listen to me speak online and elsewhere, is listen out for how many times I say essentially and have a shot or have a sip of your drink or whatever, and you'll have liver failure within the space of 15 minutes. Um, so, in terms of the Home Guard, their stories stay locally because they were a local unit. They were quite possibly the most accessible military unit of the Home Forces during the Second World War, and as a result of that, they were visible to the public. Their stories were kept within families, and their stories stay at a local level. And this is one of the other reasons why they are relatively prominent. They're more accessible in terms of a military unit. Well, you compare that to the Home Forces, whose stories were by and large not as accessible. The units themselves were often at a distance from members of the public unless they were occupying or garrisoning roadblocks and doing exercise in a local area. And today, to a certain extent, if even if you see photos of the regular and territorial army, they are often called the Home Guard. And I'm seeing a lot on Facebook where people are posting photos of their relatives in the regular and territorial army and asking if they're Home Guard, and it just shows how far this influence has spread, where regular and territorial army units have been identified as Home Guard when they're not. But yeah, as a result of this kind of distancing and the documentary records being widely inaccessible up until the 80s and 90s, for example, is another reason why the regulars and territorial army units aren't as well known as they really should be. So you've got this division of public from the separation from the public, especially in coastal areas, for example, where members of the public weren't allowed to enter, and where they were generally not operating in populated areas, for example, or if they were easy to overlook. So yeah, that's one of the other reasons I've just been thinking of. I'm just going to kind of try and share a slide from my Order of Battle talk here, and I'm going to try and do it without turning my audio off again. Right, so let me switch that. Sorry while I fumble around and mess this up right there. Okay, so for those of you who've watched my earlier talks, this was a slide from the one I did about the Home Forces Order of Battle. And, and the key thing to get across here is that the Home Guard were just one aspect of the Home Forces during the Second World War, and they were by no means the primary force in 1940 and 41. They were a massively secondary force and didn't come to prominence until at the very earliest, late 1941, in some areas a bit earlier. But there's no one size fits all story for this. In some areas they never got any real prominence. In other areas they were brought in alongside the regulars and territorial army units for localised defence quite early on in 1941, for example. And again, the key point I want to get across here is that the Home Guard were just one unit out of various echelons of the military forces, so everything from military intelligence, the Royal Navy, the Air Forces, Royal Artillery, for example, the regular and territorial army units, the various reserve units of the regs and TAs, and for some reason I've left off the auxiliary units and these special duty sections, which again get a lot of attention next to the Home Guard, but are just one facet of the Home Forces. And it's just one thing that I keep on banging on about is how these stories and how this localized nature of the story of the Home Guard has influenced our understanding of the Home Forces as they were. Let me just try and go back to turn that off. Yeah, so what we're seeing today is this kind of like very focused picture of the units of the Home Forces, and obviously because the Home Guard were relatively accessible and their stories stayed locally, this is why we have this kind of like focus on the Home Guard. So it's not, you can't just all, even though I like to joke about it and do it, I can't just blame Dad's Army for this. There's a whole range of reasons, and one of them is that the Home Guard were accessible and local, and their stories stay locally, and people remember these stories, and they're passed on and written down and all that stuff. While in terms of the regular and territorial army, you need to go to the National Archives and look at their stories in the war diaries and documents, unless you had like a relative who was deployed in the Home Force in the regs and TAs or elsewhere who shared their stories, for example. But these stories are often connected to a different place. So when the units move around, they weren't necessarily in a place that their families live today, for example. And yeah, that's just something that's always on my mind, and something that, yeah, just one of the things that's influenced our understanding of this period of history today. And we're starting today to only just start to piece together the very broad picture of what was going on at a national level outside of the Home Guard. And there's a lot of work to be done to start to break down that picture, but most importantly, see the Home Guard in context, which is vitally important to understanding how important their role was to supporting the regulars and territorial army. Because the Home Guard, although not responsible for primary defence in 1940, 41, and to a certain extent 42, they were still key to undertaking important roles such as passing on information through the chain of command, keeping an eye out for paratroops so that they could be dealt with by the professional soldiers, and here's a key thing, keeping the road and mainly the road network open for counterattack of these mobile reserves, which are all but forgotten today. So the Home Guard were a vitally significant part of the Home Forces, and have this vital role of keeping things moving in terms of the professional armies, to make sure that they could counterattack the invading force, and limiting civilian traffic in such areas as well, making sure that the road network didn't get clogged with civilians and other vehicles. So yeah, that's, as always, that's just like my little rambly thoughts for this week. I'm gonna get back to doing the research. I've got a load more war diaries coming through today, which hopefully will give me a bit more information and just give me the kick up the backside I need to get back into the research. And I've got a big report due in next week, and after that I've got a week off and got a bit more spare time to do some mapping and stuff, and hopefully the weather will turn crap and I can enjoy it being a bit cooler or something like that. Anyway, that's my random thoughts for this week. I'm going to go and climb into the fridge or something, and I'll see you all soon. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later, and goodbye.